Welcome to the first discussion segment of Development Focus with Jide on ITV. Today, 12th of October 2022. Like we said before we went on this short break, the short break, we did say that 2023 budget is of concern to Nigerians generally and to us also on TMI. That's on this station. And we have brought a financial expert, but primarily he's a lawyer. I don't know why he prefers the figures. He should have been a professor of economics or business admin now, but Ezon Yekpere Esquire is a lawyer of, he's a senior lawyer, a lawyer of over 20 years standing, but who has carved a niche for himself with analyzing the Nigerian budget over the years. And that's why we have asked him. He wrote an article. He is also a columnist with the Punch newspaper. On Monday this week, he wrote an article which I read, where he said Nigeria's 2023 budget is dead on arrival. So I've dragged him into the studio to come and justify why he thought the budget of 2023 is dead on arrival. Ezon Yekpere Esquire, you're welcome on the show.
My pleasure.
So,
just to take it from you, 20 years, you said maybe over 20 years working on the budget. I was called to the bar in 1988, so you can do your maths. If I was in the civil service, I should be retiring in a year or two.
Of course.
That's 34 years.
34 years
so
at the bar.
Showing now 14 years from where I am is
no, I quite didn't get how long you've been at the bar, but I said it's over 20 years. So 34 years at the bar. You are due to, if you have been a practicing lawyer, you should be a senior advocate of Nigeria by now. But it's not too late. You are still a practicing lawyer on the side, but majorly a development worker and the lead director, Center for Social Justice. So, Eze, let's start from the parameters of 2023 budget. Run us through what those key highlights of 2023 budget is before we know whether it's alive or dead on arrival.
Well, I think the 2023 budget, the statement you said alluded to me, is based on empirical evidence. You know, you look back to what has happened in the past and the trajectories of the various indicators and the macroeconomic parameters, and then you use it to analyze or to judge what may likely happen by 2023. Now, the first one we looked at was this issue of oil price benchmark. And it was a considered view that you can no longer be talking of oil price benchmark at a time an NPC Limited is now a company limited by shares with directors, and which is no longer duty bound to simply sell crude oil and bring the proceeds for sharing at the Federation account to the trade tiers of government. If you recall, for almost 8 months since the beginning of the year, I don't remember an NPC had brought any kobo for sharing at the Federation account, although the claim is that they are paying subsidy. But as it is today, they can no longer legally be asked to do that. They can only bring a part of their profits at the end of the year. The accounts are audited. You now make profit like every other company. You declare dividends. And normally, you don't declare all your profits as dividends. You will have to put aside some for running expenses, some for investments. And this particular NPC is even projecting that they will do an IPO next year to raise funding for its operations. So in essence, what I'm saying that the parameters...
IPO meaning initial public offering.
Public offer. That's what they're planning, to raise funds. So you can imagine whatever profit they make at the end of the year, they must keep aside something to join
operating.
Yeah. So in essence, what I'm saying is that it should have been about a forecast of the profitability of an NPC and what they can bring back to the Federation account, rather than hinging it on just oil production like in the old regime. The music has changed. The PIA has changed what an NPC used to be to what it is today. So the projections should have also changed. Now, assuming those projections we are still based on the parameters of yesterday, telling us that we'll produce only 1.69 million barrels a day, it's like we've thrown our hands into the air to the oil thieves, to those vandals or whatever. Because if you recollect, as at 2015, when the last administration left, we were doing about 2.16, 2.17 million barrels per day. And the expectation was that we should have been growing to not less than between 2.5 to 3 million barrels a day. Why do we need to do that? Oil is a Western asset. You know, the energy transition. So whatever we can make of oil today, we should use it to now reposition ourselves, diversify economy, also diversify our sources of energy, so that tomorrow when oil will become like coal, we will have made some sufficient resources to put us on the way to economic diversification. So that's one point. The second issue was about the projection relating to the exchange rate. Now you are we
$70 per
no. The budget is talking about 435.57 as the exchange rate.
Oh, okay. The exchange rate to a dollar.
To a dollar.
I thought it's all benchmark. All benchmark is $70.
$70 per barrel. I will still come
So
back to that.
that one is unofficial rate is about 700.
700 and something.
So you now benchmark it at 435.
If you talk about that, the CBN will tell you that they have that legal mandate, okay, to determine the exchange rate of the naira, okay, price stability, and that this is for what they call the black market. But my thinking is that when the official market does not contribute as much as the so-called black or parallel market, now so it will be a fixation for us to still insist, oh, CBN says it's 435, when everybody knows that over 90% of Nigerian businessmen cannot get foreign exchange at that rate. So majority of the price you see on our shelves at supermarket, the cars, are determined by that one you say you have not recognized. So is it not time that we tell ourselves the truth to begin to have a convergence, a harmony between the two rates, instead of encourage rent seeking and arbitrage? Because the few dollars that are available for CBN to give out, it now becomes a question of opportunism, cronyism. So you can even simply collect money at 435. You don't need to invest to do any business at all. All you need to do is to sit down in your house. Today is about 730, 735, and sell it. And when you sell it, you are making extra 300 naira per dollar. So if you've got $1 million, you will make 300 million without working. Now, that's why I'm saying it doesn't even encourage production. Assuming you are a businessman, you are to go and buy, things like spare parts, machinery, raw materials. You come back, you pay staff, you pay government taxes. There is no way you can make that kind of profit. Indeed, for every dollar, you can't even make 1/10 of it. So the encouragement, if you get that dollar, is simply to sell it and make like that kind of huge money without sweating, without anybody disturbing you. So it will not encourage production. Now back to that oil price benchmark. It's still part of the discussion of what is the new NNPC going to do. It makes some sense. You remember the current government has made a song and a dance out of the high oil prices of the previous era.
Yeah.
Oh, they sold oil at above 100 for some months and they did nothing with it. And today we have been selling oil at over $100 for almost 6-7 months going now. And instead of,
because of the Ukraine Russian crisis.
Yes, and instead of having a buffer in terms of our foreign reserves or more money coming in, we are not even meeting the little production quota OPEC gave us. And that is because of the so-called oil theft. Now you ask yourself this question: why this oil theft? Why is it getting out of hand now? It is not today we started hearing of oil theft, but today it has gotten to a stage that is so critical and alarming that even as at a month or two ago, we did less than 1 million barrels, about 972,000
out of barrels, the projected 1.8.
So less than about 50% or a little less than 50%.
It's stolen.
Now, you have also had the new contract given to Chief Tompolo, how we are now seeing, things happening. They say, okay, somebody simply did not just, so this is no longer a question of
I need to pause you. We need to go on a short commercial break and we'll be back to continue with the discussion. So, I'm sorry, we need to pay bills.
Okay, we were discussing the oil theft.
The oil theft, yes.
And if you look at what is happening, it's no longer a question of, some little small badges. The NPC managing director at some point wanted to pedestrianize it. They found some jerry cans in mosques and churches. Everybody now knows that some people went into the sea and put up a huge pipe. And it continues day and night. So this is, and even some oil tankers that could carry oil worth over 300 million was caught in Equatorial Guinea after it's been let to go from Nigeria's waters. So in essence, we have a situation where this oil bunkering is coming from the highest waters. The highest, because it's not possible for anybody to do that kind of thing without the collaboration of key security agencies. And if you recall, we have a president, of course, who is also the commander-in-chief.
And also the Minister
of Petroleum. Silva is just a mere Minister of State. So the substantive minister and the commander-in-chief, apart from being Minister of Petroleum, all the chief security agencies report to him. From the Navy, NIMASA, Air Force, Army, DSS, Police. So I think the question should be, Mr. President, can you please come clean and explain to Nigerians? There's not anybody pretending anything. The days of pretenses are gone. Mr. President should explain to Nigerians what happened. If it is that his participants criminis is part of it, too bad. If it is negligence, this is gross negligence.
In fact, some people are saying, should we be honoring our security chiefs with national awards when...
I think the Minister of Education was also given.
Yes.
Or was he eventually removed?
I don't know. I don't think so.
His name appeared on the first list, but did they give him...
That's as people are saying. Under these security chiefs, we have this huge loss of revenue on our hands.
That is almost collapsing the nation.
It has collapsed the nation, hasn't it?
So with that, why are we honoring them? So these are the things I looked at when I said the revenue, my challenge is that the revenue projections may not likely be realized. We are projecting to make about 9-point-something trillion, and then the other 10.7 will be deficit. Even that 9.7 trillion, we are not likely to realize it. Because going back to 2022 performance, the president in the budget speech said that up to July this year, all the income that came in was about 3.66 trillion. 30.66, and this is July. So normally I should have said 50%. It's even past the half-year mark. Assuming you double that for 2022, 3.66 by 2 will not give you anything more than 7.2 trillion, while we are targeting to make about 9.7. As at the first 6 months of this year, we've incurred about 4.3 trillion in deficit. So we've even spent more than definitely.
But the argument is also that next year they are going to remove fuel subsidy. So fuel subsidy will not go up as much as 7 trillion.
No, they are not proposing to remove fuel subsidy. The president's proposal is to let fuel subsidy be until June when he leaves office.
That is it.
And thereafter
3.6.
Yeah, and thereafter he now proposes they can remove it. Why are you trying to create a time bomb for your predecessor? The hard decision
for your successor.
For your successor. You have to make that hard decision now. You imagine a president is sworn in and the first thing he says is fuel subsidy off, and then price of goods and services will rise, people will start demonstrating. So he should have started that. It should be phased. It shouldn't be in one fell swoop.
But
you can take away 25, 30 or 50% now.
But today we are buying fuel for official rate 175 instead of 165. So about 10 naira has climbed on top of.
No. If you look at the exchange rate and what it costs to bring in, there is still a whole lot of subsidy, on it. Let's tell ourselves the truth.
As the administration agreed now that there is fuel subsidy.
So if they have not agreed, why are they allowing an NPC to deduct the money?
But initially they were talking of under recovery.
The president reported that we spent about 1 point. What did he report? Money that was chasing 2 trillion in subsidy for the first 6 months of the year. So if he has not acknowledged, whether you call it under recovery, give it a baptismal name, or a confirmation name, subsidy is subsidy. So whatever playing on what you are doing, it doesn't make sense. So coming back...
But do you support the removal of subsidy?
For heaven's sake, that subsidy should have gone 1,000 years ago. Because it is a wrong subsidy. We are subsidizing consumption. I would rather we find a mechanism to subsidize production, which means let the refineries work and let new ones spring up. If we are currently, for instance, crude oil is selling for about 90 or thereabout. If we find a mechanism, if the cost of digging it out from the boils of the 80, say 15, 20, we can give to local refineries at half of the $90 per barrel, okay, to refine for domestic production. They can take it at 45.50. So that's a subsidy we can give them, but that petroleum must be sold to Nigerians at a price that is not at the level of the international oil market. So I can support that kind of subsidy, but not a subsidy that is benefiting foreign refineries, putting jobs in foreign companies, increasing their profits so that they pay more personally their corporate tax to who? To their government. So at the end of the day, that should go. Now, so what I was talking about, the huge, money they want to borrow. There is a proposal to go and borrow 8.80 trillion, fresh. Now, if you add it to the Nigeria's current debt, the one acknowledged by DMO is about 42 trillion, 42.8 or thereabout. If you add the 20 trillion in ways and means, the money they borrow from central bank, that will give you about 63 trillion. Now, add the 8.80 trillion he's going to borrow, that will give you between 71 and 72 trillion before he leaves. Now, as of today, we should be thinking of a moratorium on new borrowing. Moratorium in the sense that we're inside a hole and we are declaring and shouting that we want to come out. So the best way to go can be no more digging. It is to look for that rope, look for that ladder that will bring us out. And so we can restrict borrowing to the exceptional cases. But here we are proposing to borrow, to pay salaries, to pay subsidy, and to do all the usual frivolous things that government will do, from the executive to the National Assembly, insist that they must get their own share of the national cap from what? Borrowed money. And where are you going to get money to repay over the long run? Let me give you an example. We borrowed money from China to build the Kaduna-Abuja train. Even before the bandits stopped the train services, Nigerian government was subsidizing that railway service with about 45 million every month. Now, you borrowed money to build a railway train and the tracks, and you are supposed to pay back. Instead of making money or imposing cost-reflective tariff on that, you are taking money from somewhere and subsidizing. So where will you get the money to repay from? If you note of late, the Chinese have stopped disbursing new money to us because they have looked through the economy and discovered that it will very sooner than later, we may not be able to service those debts and we may not be able to pay. And then a huge scandal will come out. Are they going to take over the airport? Are they going to take over the railway? The kind of stories we have happened in other African countries. And you can imagine what that will mean for a country like Nigeria. They are very reluctant now to give out new money because, first of all, they see that most of those contracts are inflated. The other day, it was reported in the media, the Egyptians are constructing a rail line that's going to crisscross their country over 460-something kilometers by Siemens, the German company. It will cost them how much? $8 billion to have rail lines across the whole of Egypt. But here, one of the rail lines that they are proposing, the one from Port Harcourt going up to Lagos, going up north, they are calling $11 billion. And you ask yourself, what exactly is happening? All our rail lines, including the ones they have in Lagos, a small one that is no more than 20-30 kilometers in Lagos, is as heavy as, in terms of the money we are spending, is bigger than what countries like Ethiopia did when they took the heavy rail line from a seaport that was outside their country down to their capital. So in essence, what we are saying is that deficit that they are projecting is very, very heavy. And if we are able to raise that money either from foreign loans or domestic loans, it will be a huge problem for the incoming administration because it will get to a point where you can no longer pay. You are no longer making the foreign exchange to pay. Then the only thing you can do is to continue printing naira. And the more you print naira, not by value, the more you depreciate your currency, the more you bring inflation, the more you make your currency like a worthless piece of paper.
Okay, Eze, I heard you. But let's look at, there have been call for reduction in the cost of governance. How will you rate this administration? It's in the papers today, I think the Punch newspaper, that about 18 billion naira is being used to service the presidential air fleet. And initially people are calling for, the reduction, substantial reduction in the presidential air fleet. It shouldn't be more than 2 aircraft. People will even tell you that the UK Prime Minister flies British Caledonia Airways and all of that. But what have you seen? And one thing I know Center for Social Justice does is to look at the frivolous expenditure items in budgets. I don't know whether you have had time in the last few days to look at.
We're in the process of pulling out. We've not concluded, but it appears to me from the little I've seen, I seem to say is a what I call a continuation of the norm. And the norm is about wasteful, frivolous, inappropriate, and sometimes outright illegal expenditure. So we're in the process of pulling that out, and the little we have seen, like I said, nothing has changed. Even people, one had expected the government, because every year they talk about the Orosanye Committee report. One would have expected that by now, they should have had a proper white paper, reviewing the previous white paper, and then come out with critical recommendations. I'm not saying anybody should be sacked, but there are wastages and leaks that can be plugged or can be corrected. And then, beyond even the Orosanye Committee report, you ask yourself, there are some agencies you need to sit down and ask to properly account for the money they make. Okay? For instance, we've been discussing in the past, you see River Basin Development Authorities. A River Basin Development Authority, typical, has over 20,000 acres of land or hectares of land. And they get money in the budget previously to say 5, 10, 1 billion to clear the land. Government supplies you tractors, you have 20,000 hectares of land, yet at the end of the day, what do you return to the treasury? If you call professional farmers and give them that 20,000 hectares and all the machinery government has, put in place, just put up a company and say this company is worth 20 billion. You value the land, you value the machinery and all government equipment, you come forward to say it is worth 5 to 10 billion. So out of that, you create a company where government owns, say, 49 or 50%. Bring in private sector operatives. There's no way an agricultural company will operate 20,000 hectares at the end of the year, plant it with maize, corn or cassava or wheat or rice, and not be able to bring 34 billion naira to treasury as part of what government is to get. So there are lots of ways, even beyond cutting down on the West, we can create new money. Okay? Even the government-owned enterprises that under the Finance Act, they're supposed to at least return 50% of the revenue they make. The Finance Act says they shouldn't spend more than 50. And we've been clamoring over the years that don't leave this money with them at the end of the year to come and account. Put it on the proverbial TSA. The implication is that the management of the company has access to it, sees it, Ministry of Finance, Accountant General sees it. So that at the end of the quarter, you do a withdrawal. You deduct. You don't wait for a remittance, because if you allow them to run this money, you are not looking at it. They find clever ways of hiding the money here and there. But if everybody's looking, once the revenue comes, since 50% is for federal government, you deduct.
How do you think corruption has impacted on the lack of proper implementation of our budget over the years? We are celebrating the fact that Buhari has returned Nigerian budgeting calendar to January to December. But beyond that, I'm not sure. You are the experts here. Have we ever been able to 100% implement our budget? And what role does corruption, because you are alluding to this in this statement you just made now, but how big is corruption in affecting the implementation of our budget? You're talking of TSA. IPPIS is under the Minister of Finance, and the Accountant General of the Federation was caught with hand in the cookie jar. He's answering for 109 billion corruption allegations with EFCC. So, as somebody who has been working in the area of this budget analysis and all of that, how much of corruption have you seen in limiting the implementation?
Of course, it must limit because contracts are still inflated. Okay? Once you have that inflation of contract, but let's get it clear, it's not just corruption alone that is limiting budget implementation. And when you talk of budget implementation here, it's more about the capital budget because salaries will always be paid and overheads run down. That's about recurrent expenditure. So it's the capital component of the budget. First of all, we have hardly had a year when we realized all the projected revenue. So that alone limits capital budget implementation because you must pay salaries, you must service debts, and whatever is remaining now goes to capital expenditure. Now, there are also bureaucratic bottlenecks, some of them related to procurement, where people don't plan their procurement early. They don't do what they're supposed to do. Maybe money gets released to them in October, and if you get money in October, you now start advertising, 6 weeks advertising, and after that, you set up a committee, and all of before you know it, they say return money to Treasury. But these are things you could have done at the beginning of the year, get everything sorted out. You can do your procurement, and if Jide wins, I don't need to inform you or anybody whether you've won or lost. Finish it by March. If money is disbursed to me in October or November, I call you immediately and say, mobilize to site, come and collect your 15% and start work. So those bottlenecks sometimes delay. And then the other part of it is this corruption, inflation of contracts. We did a study, actually, about on the road sector in the past, and that showed that
when you say we, that's Center for Social Justice.
And that study benchmarked the cost of building roads in Nigeria to selected African countries from South Africa to Egypt to Ghana to Cote d'Ivoire to Gambia, and we also try to benchmark the kind of land topography so that let it not be that we are benchmarking Niger Delta costs where you have swamps you need to fill up before constructing with dry not roads. And we still saw that for every place they were using $100 million, Nigeria was between 150, 200, 250. The other day you saw the Ghana interchange of 4 lanes, okay, flyovers, 4 lanes. It cost only $96 million. Now, do you know the cost of the second Niger bridge that, all the noise we've heard, second Niger bridge? Go and check out the cost. We are discussing something in excess of 200 and something billion. Try and convert that. You see the kind of stuff, So in essence, corruption is so heavy. I've talked to you about the railways and comparing them what you see in other parts of the world. So that is a very huge part. But beyond corruption, there are other systemic challenges. For instance, it may surprise you that the Ministry of Health sometimes, or most times, returns money to the Treasury, does not spend all this money. With all the health challenges all over the place, they return the money. Basic healthcare provision fund, you bring money, you don't disburse all of it. You ask yourself, but people are dying from even the illnesses that 5,000. Malaria, ordinary malaria is killing people. Could prevent, yet Ministry of Health is not fully drawing down this money.
With the wastages you have discovered in successive budgeting in Nigeria, how do you think we can curtail this waste? The rising cost of governance, how do you think we can tame that? Because today, what you procure for 5 naira is now going for 7, 8, or 10 naira. So how do you think we can? You mentioned an Oronsai report. Maybe the white paper should have been. But in this budget, our budget still not given to those enterprises or MDAs that are supposed to have been liquidated. So how do we essentially reduce the cost of governance in Nigeria going forward?
It will be very difficult to do that because somebody was saying we need a unicameral legislature. Are you going to ask the Senate and the House to scrap themselves? That's no longer within the context of the present legal arrangement. The president cannot do it by fiat. You need an amendment of the laws of the Constitution to be able to do that. That's one. Two is that we need a people-led government, not just the usual political parties that will be able to look at the MDAs, to look at political office holders in the face, leading by example to say, no, we can't continue this way. So if you have a president who will say, let me cut down my own perks of office, he leads by example. So it's going to be easier for him to challenge other government officials in the legislature, in other parts of the executive. But you cannot, like you're pointing out, be flying these big jets, be using hundreds of millions to feed the presidential villa, and then you've not tightened your belt, and then you come and begin to sermonize to the common people to say, oh, we need to tighten your belt. Nobody is going to listen. So the only way it can happen is a presidency that leads by the power and force of example. So if you have a president who should have a convoy of 30 vehicles like happens today, and you see him going with 3, 4, 5 maximum, so it's easy for him to call you, Mr. Speaker, I saw 15 vehicles in your convoy. I'm sorry, you shouldn't use more than 5. Even if the speaker declares that he's independent, you fight him with the power of public opinion. And public opinion will definitely be strong on any president on his side. And the president will be, whoever is on the other side will have the media and the people to contend with. After a time, he will definitely have to cut down his own. So that's the kind of way. But if you are looking at a legalistic way or saying this law is done, this one is done, it's going to be extremely difficult. Because those you are calling to make the law, the operators of the system, have benefits. Okay, how do you tell them to cut down their own benefits if you are not dragging them kicking and screaming? Otherwise, they will not listen to you.
Okay, so there have been clamor for diversification of the economy, and this administration will tell you that they pride themselves as having been able to diversify the anchor borrowers program of the Ministry of Agriculture, under the CBN, the non-oil sector. They said they have grown the non-oil sector to an appreciable level so much. Then the taxation system, they've really been able to also increase the taxation. The value-added tax from 5% to 7.5%. And now recently, maybe they have implemented the tariff on telecommunication, where they also intend to plug in additional 5%. How do you think this administration, vis-a-vis the budget 2023, have fared in terms of diversification of the economy?
No, the economy hasn't been diversified. It's still, to a great extent, oil dependent. And what will show you that is that once theft and vandalism cut down the oil resources, the currency took a nosedive. It moved from 400 to the present 700. So if we have actually reduced our dependence on crude oil and this sell, we wouldn't be where we are today. All those things we are talking about, anchor borrowers program, this is a loan people were supposed to repay. But ask CBN to tell you what percentage have repaid their money and what percentage they are chasing now to go and pay back. So in essence, those things were tokenistic in the sense that they were discussing value chain development in the budget without actually anything on ground to develop value chains. Because what you have is that they will say agricultural, cassava value chain, cocoa value chain, rice value chain, maize value chain. They put a lump sum, 10 billion, 5 billion, 15 billion. What does maize value chain mean? Nobody has sat down to, articulate and tell us this is the full meaning. You get to a research institute. They are perpetually giving money to research on crops and animal husbandry. But where are the off-takers? How are they linked to the women in the village who constitute the greater part of farmers, small-scale women farmers? Is there any mechanism where the research experts who have told them that there's a new cassava stem cotton that will give you, instead of say that will give you 20 baskets instead of the 10 you used to harvest per hectare? So who is taking it to those rural farmers? Nobody. So there is that big disconnect. And nobody has told the rural people that if you take something like cassava, that beyond processing it into fufu or gari, that there are other things that you can get out of it.
Pharmaceutical
starch.
Starch.
Ethanol.
Industrial starch and ethanol.
And the machinery to do this are things you can ask research institutes like the FIRO in Oshodi to fabricate. They don't need to be imported. And you can set these things up, one per local government. Look at the kind of crop that is there. And then you fabricate these machines to begin to process them beyond the raw materials beyond the things that we are using today into even maybe raw materials for our industry, so that instead of importing, at least we start producing them, and over the course of time, we'll get to a stage where we can begin to export. So what you have is value chain development on paper. It's a recognition that we need value chain. It's always been there, but nobody has taken it beyond the sloganeering to make it practical. That's the challenge.
So where is the role of innovation, science and technology in our budgeting system, and how do we improve revenue to fund our budgets?
That's the challenge. You talked about innovation. We have a Ministry of Science and Technology. If you've been reading the newspapers of late, you discover a certain young man in Borno who they say is converting car engines to make them work on solar to
electric cars.
And he's not just a big university graduate, anybody. It's just like any other person you see. These are the kind of people we should have investments. Get our businessmen, get government to give a little grant to push, kickstart them, because that is the way to go. So if we are able to see young talents and begin to move beyond science, because we are not discussing science again, to now go into technology. After drawing those long graphs and charts, how do you convert them into, small companies that will introduce innovations that can kickstart the economy? This is what we expect, because even the Ministry of Science and Technology has so many research institutes. Now, the question is, what are those research institutes producing? Naseni now has been put on the first line charge. It is taking 1% of the Consolidated Revenue Fund, just like National Assembly, UBECA is now on the first line charge for the past 2-3 years. Now, what are they doing? What are they doing with the money? So you don't give somebody such a sum of money without setting targets. If it is just to say one thing at a time, say, Naseni, we are on an energy transition curve. Naseni, please, let's start fabricating solar panels locally. I'm not asking you to go and get the Germans or the Chinese.
Let me pause you. We need to go on short commercial break. Then you give us your closing thoughts. So we are on the home stretch. You were talking about Naseni, fabrication of solar panel and all of that.
I'm saying with the 1% CRF, they could be asked to do one single thing.
Okay.
We are on that energy transition and the curve. If it's just to produce locally, I'm not asking you to get some Chinese or Germans to come and start assembly here. If you can just do that alone and mass produce it, that will account for whatever money. Now, in rounding up, the President Muhammadu Buhari is in the last couple of months of his administration. There is not much he can do again. He's like a sitting duck. Let's not pretend and be hoping against hope. So what we need to do, we are discussing economy, but there's no way you can remove it from politics, is to look for a competent, capable, trustworthy, honest, and dedicated leader post-Buhari's administration who has the vision with a clear mission and the mandate of Nigerians to begin to solve some of these economic problems and challenges one by one. That is the way to go. Discussing what this government will do will be like wasting time, with utmost respect.
The Japa phenomenon, how is it affecting us economic-wise because of the brain drain that is happening now? Almost all the embassies, they will go to I think they should soon be going to Canada by road now, because the number of Nigerians going to Canada, to UK, to US. What impact does it have on our economy and on budget? When
your best brains are living, when you discuss resources, people tend to focus more on finance. Finance is just one. The greatest resource is a human resource, because if you place $1 billion here without capable hands, it will...
You fritter it.
It's a fritter away. So if your best doctors, your best computer programmers are living, your best even literature. Did you know at a time before Achebe died, he couldn't lecture in any Nigerian university again?
He went to Brown University.
The last place is Shoyinka lectured was not in Nigeria. And you know what it could have meant for a Nigerian student studying literature to have a Shoyinka or Achebe sitting and lecturing you, how that will make you feel. So our best brains are living. It will affect the economy one way or the other, and sooner than later. Even if you go to some teaching hospitals now, most of the faculties, most of the critical, competent experts have left. So you go there, somebody needs to look at your ear, nose, or throat, and they say the best hand has left. What do you find as student doctor? So
anyway, I want to thank you profusely. Eze Onyekpere Esquire for your insightful analysis of 2023 budget. We've touched virtually on different aspects of the budget, including the economy as a whole. And then he has put the icing on the cake. Politics, we cannot run away from. Next year elections, let's shine our eyes. Let's vote competent leaders, even if we know Buhari administration is counting down to its exit date. Let's do the needful and vote right people in all the political offices that will be available for competition next year. That will be the size of our program this morning, Development Focus with Jide Ojo on ITV. If you have enjoyed this, stay tuned. Next week, next Wednesday, we'll bring you a fresh edition. Have a great day.